I want to share with you some, so the title they gave you here is How Mobile is Changing the Game. I'm going to change the title here a little bit, but I want to check the audience. How many of you, I'm going to ask just two questions, buy side, sell side. How many of you sit on the sell side of media, technology or media? Okay, good. And then how many of you sit on the marketer or buy side, agency side? Oh, wow, we're actually pretty equally split. Okay, well, unfortunately, in some regards, I'm going to talk to the sales side of the business today. In fact, I've actually, because I thought that was sort of the focus of some of the membership of Joe's organization and some of how you looked at the business. I've been fortunate enough, I've actually worked on both sides of the business. In fact, I'm very happy to report that I was a very avid buyer of outdoor media. In fact, one of the greatest career moments I had, although maybe it's a small win in some regards, is I actually recommended to one of the Procter & Gamble brands to do outdoor. This is 25 years ago. And what was interesting about that is that the only time I've ever had any client from my agency days, let alone Procter & Gamble, they actually said to me, wow, that's interesting, that outdoor program, Greg, could you actually double the budget against it? So it was a very high watermark because you usually didn't get those kind of things, let alone for an alternative media. So I applauded that Procter and their sort of thinking around that. I've actually changed the title of the talk I want to share with you today. What I want to talk a little bit about, those of you who sell local media, and what I think might be one of the biggest opportunities you may see in our generation, I'd say. Because I think that's really what mobile is happening. In some regards, internet to me was a tasting menu to what mobile presents and has an opportunity for us to do today. So some background, the MMA, just for those of you who don't know us, because we are the newest of the media marketing trade associations, we have 550 members in 49 countries around the world. We actually are probably the only, dare I say, truly global media marketing trade group, and we sit on both the buy side and the sell side of the organization. And I'm actually in the process of getting ready to announce a brand new chair of my organization, which specifically comes from the marketer side. It's actually a real industry illuminee. So I hope to look forward to making that announcement to you shortly. But obviously, the comments that I'm going to share with you today are in the context of a rapidly changing media marketplace, right? This is true for if you sit in the same place I do with having teenagers in the house. I mean, I know for a fact that my 14-year-old twin daughters have never, ever looked at a newspaper. Wouldn't have any concept of it. Wouldn't even know why it would matter to them in any way whatsoever. Now, I don't know that that doesn't change over time. Hopefully it does, because there's still a lot of value in all the media. But interesting, some of the seismic shifts. Now, Joe was kind enough, too, to kind of put some of my comments in context. I'm going to tell you where I'm going here in a minute. I just want to kind of set some ground, some baseline for you. Joe was actually kind of to send me sort of outdoor spending trends, billions of dollars, U.S. only. Gives you a sense, good to know that, is moving upwards. And, for all good sake, if Joe and the rest of the industry, you all do your job, those trends should continue. I wanted to compare that, though, to what I think, back to my original comment, that this is a generational opportunity like we will not see in our careers, and that is mobile. Now, there's been a lot of people who have said, it's the year of mobile. It's become kind of a joke within my industry. It's the way that we make fun of ourselves and others make fun of us, dare I say. And yet there is something seismic that I believe is happening, and I say that from the context of both being a student, a philosopher, an interested learner about the world of advertising and marketing now for the 30 years of my career. I do believe that we have not seen anything like this before, and maybe will since. We'll see. Now, unfortunately, obviously, that's causing a lot of changes, right? We need to rethink how we do things. We're having to pick up new skills, and I have no way to nullify that. I have no way to make that easy for you. It is part of what's going to happen. We are going to need to learn new skills, maybe not just this one exactly, but some example of some of the things that we're facing. And it's all a part of what I would view as a rapidly changing world. Roll this, advertising has a great way of picking up what's happening. If we could roll the tape.
1,000 texts last month.
MWRUS?
That wasn't a compliment. Sean, 1,000 texts?
UGH.
And you're old enough to know better.
MYOB, will you?
Grandma.
Mom, who could you be texting?
IDK, my BFF Rose.
Now get a texting plan the whole family can NJOY.
So you get the idea, right? There's a changing world. I don't know how many of you know this, but the average teenager today sends, not sends and receives, but sends 3,300 text messages a month. Anybody shocked to hear that? A couple, the older ones in the back, I think. If you have, how many of you have teenagers in the house and surprised to hear that there's 3,000 text messages a month? Yeah. How many think that's low? Yeah, there we go. I knew I'd get to the right question to capture that one. So here's what I want to talk a little bit about today. I want to talk about a local marketer's viewpoint of mobile, just how they're seeing it, because part of what we faced, and those of you who know me know I did digital media for a lot of years, particularly internet, sort of obviously. I want to talk, there was a lot of resistance that marketers, in particular sort of small marketers had, local marketers had, as it related to the internet. I think that's all gone. I want to share some insights. I then want to talk to you a little bit about how the MMA is looking at mobile, and then I really want to get to the opportunity that presents itself for you, okay? So let's look at the state of mobile as it pertains to small marketers, generally retailers are a good example of that. Recent data from them suggests that they believe that smartphones are significant in driving traffic. Now that might be kind of an obvious point, but it appears that there's an inflection point that's happened where those numbers have really begun to shift, where that they believe at an even more significant level that mobile drives a lot of value to driving traffic. Should be obvious, right? Every retailer, that's all they focus on. It's all they really care about. When you also ask small, medium-sized marketers, businesses, with a presence in different digital channels, how do they look at what they're trying to accomplish? Mobile here is identified in the chart. What do they have and what do they expect to have? Very high marks on what they expect to get to very soon, right? So we've seen this shift. I've seen other data by the Kelsey and other people that suggest the same kind of thing. In some regards, it's led me to suggest that I think in a lot of regards, mobile is the missing piece to local. You look at what's happening in your marketplace, Yellow Pages, $15 billion category, going like this. Newspapers off 50% from $50 billion originally. Radio, $20 billion industry, largely local, massive amounts of transition, change going on there, in particular around connected cars. TV, similar sort of dynamics, although sort of I think is held somewhat strong. Mobile, I believe, is the opportunity to step in and capture a big chunk of those dollars for reasons that I just expressed and that marketers are interested in, right? And in fact, from my friends, I think this is Kelsey, I have to check the source on this, pretty sure it's Kelsey. From the Kelsey folks, they're actually suggesting that in the next 3 years, that local mobile overtakes national mobile in terms of its total spend. Again, a big opportunity. You have the marketers moving that direction, you have their openness to it. Now, a couple of years ago, I was asked to speak to a group of local publishers, and I thought, wow, this would be an easy presentation to do. I happened to be showing up at a publisher conference the weekend before I was to give this speech. I thought, I'm just going to ask 10 of my publisher friends about what they're doing in order to build their mobile skill set, their mobile channels across the board. And I thought, this is simple. I'll collect a bunch of insight. I'll walk in, and I'll give a I'll write the presentation on the plane. I'll walk in and give it. This should be easy. The title of my presentation, because this was the underlying strategy for every one of those publishers, was we hired a guy. That was as far as they had gotten, and that was 2 years ago. Now, what's interesting about that is at the time that mobile usage by consumers was around 10–15% of the total traffic. I have not met a publisher today that doesn't suggest that their mobile traffic is 30%, and I'm starting to see more and more start to quote 50% as a big change. So while we're figuring out our strategy, right, we publishers, media companies are figuring out our strategy, the world's moving pretty rapidly. Consumers are really creating a whole bunch of change. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about that consumer perspective, and a little bit how the MMA sort of positions mobile and talks about that, right? First off, we all kind of know the growth charts, right? The adoption of devices, the adoption of tablets, again, have been absolutely on fire, right? But even more interesting is that the proliferation of apps and the usage of apps, and I know the data that says that apps get ignored, that we don't pay as much attention to them, but there are significant amounts of people using a significant amount of time connected to an app, which has turned it much more into a media device. And you're seeing those trends also, as this data shows, relative to minutes spent in apps versus TV and I think, is that right? Yeah, I see that some of my, I apologize there. The TV is actually on the right in the yellow. My apologies for that. And that middle one, darker orange, is actually for apps. Okay? We also see, too, a similar thing and sort of present a time spent. Again, similar data, similar to what you all sort of know and I think have come to understand, is that consumers are creating this significant shift in change to mobile. This, to me, is part of what really pushes phones and tablets into being actual media devices. Now, some of that's sort of interesting enough, right? The usage is enough that marketers will start to pay attention, and I don't have a marketer today who resists mobile in any real regards. But what we haven't really started to understand is, or maybe reflected on, maybe some of this you've heard, I apologize, I missed yesterday, but you look at the stats, 82% of people said they would never leave home without their phone, right? The average person today checks their phone 150 times a day. In fact, many of you are doing that right now, right? That's the nature of what these devices mean to us. That's the importance that they have. All those underutilized moments are when I need to get a task accomplished, right? And I know where it is, right? Every single second of the day, I know exactly where it is. Okay. Because what's happened now is become an absolute necessity. What was sort of a luxury at one point, and it's funny that I run that commercial earlier of the grandmother texting because it was so funny. I literally did get a text from my 80-year-old mother the other day who just said, "I'm just telling you I now have a smartphone and I am texting." So unlike, I think, a lot of, you saw some data earlier here, I caught some glimpses of that about how millennials are more advanced, and we tend to sort of portray, but it's not just that, right? It is a multi-generational device. We couldn't leave home without it at any point. It is that absolute extension. My friends at Coca-Cola who sit on my board actually say that they like Coca-Cola, the way they sort of explain the strategy of the business is they always want to be within an arm's length of desire of a Coca-Cola. So and then they go on to say, while they have a can of Coke in one hand, we'd like them to have their mobile phone in the other, right? That's what's happening today for major marketers. And it sort of led me to create the 3 Ps around what mobile is, in that it is personal, right? It's usually one person per phone. It's pervasive, it's with us all the time, and it has a sense of proximity, your business, right? This ability to understand the context of what people are doing and to create a local point of interest. Some have even suggested that location is a better predictor of behavior than demographics. As I heard somebody on stage here said, a kaleidoscope of people, of women 25, 54, like there's no such thing as a woman 25, 54, I think was the point that was being made, right? Okay. Now, all of this has led the MMA to develop a bunch of work around understanding position, and I appreciate Barry from the digital industry sort of positioning digital versus internet. I always, when I used to run the IAB, I always said that when the other media start to attack internet, then I will know that we have succeeded, which I think I heard a little bit from Barry this morning, so appreciate that. But we did a bunch of work with Jim Stengel from Procter & Gamble formerly Procter & Gamble, to define a position for mobile. And this is what the research and the work that they did got through that defines mobile in a marketing mix, which is that nothing brings a marketer closer to the consumers than mobile, absolutely nothing. And I generally, if I'm in a room of 100% marketers, I'll usually ask the question, how many of you believe that being closer to your customer, how many marketer members do you believe being closer to your consumers is valuable? And of course, all hands go up, right? Because what could be more important? That close connection, that ability to understand their needs and to satisfy those needs in a moment is absolutely critical. And mobile is probably, very likely, potentially, one of the more powerful channels to do that. Now, within that, though, and I'm not going to belabor this here, we have done some analytical work and are in the process of doing some research around sort of where does mobile fit into a mix. This magic answer, this was done through a mathematical number. I'm going to give you some real-world data here in a second. But we did a whole mathematical analysis. I could provide a white paper if you're interested. Either just send me a text or send me an email or something. I'll get it back to you. Or pull off our website. But we did an analysis, and it said that 2 years ago, mobile would be 7% of our marketing mix if it was to get its optimized level, i.e. what produces the best overall results for the campaign. Mobile would be 7% on average, and that varies by sort of goals. I do know, and we have not released this information, and I cannot attribute it to the brands at present, but I will very likely at our event here the first week of May We do know that the numbers today, because in part smartphone penetration has moved up, and because now we've got real world data, that those optimized levels, as we've seen in 2 campaigns only, 11% and 15%, right? That's what's happening. This is that next generation opportunity for any of us in media or marketing. Now also too, I would say that the measure of a media is not just its stats, not just its reach frequency, although a bit of a false measure, not even in some regards its ROI, but its ability to really convey and communicate a message. This was a Cannes winner, a Grand Prix winner from a couple years ago that I thought better portrayed some of the opportunity that might be in mobile, and what's particularly interesting is you'll see it's connected to outdoor. If we could play that tape, that'd be great.
The Microloan Foundation is a charity that lends money to some of the poorest women in Africa to help them to set up their own small businesses. Our campaign is called Pennies for Life. And this year, we staged a unique live event. We created unfinished portraits of African women, made entirely of pennies, and put them on a digital poster site. Then we invited people to complete the pictures by texting a donation to the poster. As soon as the message arrived, the donor got a personal thank you. Then their money dropped into place on the screen. The more texts we got, the faster the picture built, until we had enough money to make one business loan to one woman in Africa. Then we built another one, and another one. Each donor also got a credit on our microsite, where all the portraits were displayed. It was a live, interactive demonstration of small change creating big change for women in Africa. And from one poster in one shopping centre in its first weekend, 21 women who had nothing now have their own small businesses.
Yeah, she'll love it. Yeah, I love that. Even the phrase in there, if you caught it, right? Small change for big change. Very powerful. So, you know, we now even have a channel that can create emotion, that can bring all of what we've wanted from media to do to resonate with consumers and to bring that power. But let's talk a little bit about what does that mean for you as local media companies, those with expertise, those with relationships, those with technologies and access to consumers. What does that mean? What would I do if I was in your shoes, right? So, I want to share with you what I think. There's a chart in Mary Meeker's presentations, and those of you know Mary Meeker, she was a queen of the internet. She was a futurist around sort of mobile when she worked at Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan, wherever she was, Morgan Stanley, forget which one, JP Morgan, one of those. She is now at Kleiner Perkins, and there's a chart within her plethora charts that she does, as slide shows, that have become so popular, where she talks about wealth creation and channel over the years. And what she shows in there, which is very interesting, is she talks about the wealth created in mainframes. She talks about wealth created in mini computers. She talks about the wealth created in the PC generation. She talks about wealth created in internet. And then she talks about the wealth created in mobile. And is an escalating sort of opportunity, and I believe that that opportunity exists right now. And we all probably know a number of people who made a lot of money in internet. I don't think we've even begun to see that. And WhatsApp, for example, purchased by Facebook recently, I'm sure all know the data, right? $19 billion purchase price for a company generating virtually no revenues whatsoever. Is kind of reflective of some of what's probably going to happen here and the importance of sort of what's happening amongst the bigger players around sort of the mobile opportunity. Okay, so there's 3 things. Here's my premise. My premise is basic, is that you have, as I said, the relationships, you have the insight, you have the knowledge, you have the best, you have the, let's call it the lead position to lead in mobile, right? And somebody needs to lead. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that, what I mean. There's huge opportunities to innovate and educate, and somebody's got to do that. Who does that? That's what salespeople do. That's what I do when I'm trying to help build a brand for somebody else or to solve their problem. I need to help teach them. I need to create some new way of their looking at the world because I have something that's different than what they've been doing already. And finally, it's really all about scale, right? So that's a side point you're going to have to get to. I'm giving you an indication where I think you got to go to solve it. Let's talk a little bit about that some of the days. Now, what's interesting about the world is that a number of years ago, I had the opportunity to do a bunch of research. It all ended up in my now 7-cent book. And it was basically what that research showed to me is that the media companies, let me put it this way. When I was a media planning guy on the agency side, I never had a TV network, a magazine, an outdoor company, any one of the media come to me and say, Greg, let me tell you how we build your business. They talked about editorial quality. They talked about a relationship with its readers. They talked about a positioning, but not about building a business. And what's interesting about the digital media today is that we have a lot of influence in that. In fact, just to pull some quick ones, there's a series of changes that could be made in digital media. This is from internet sort of experience that could lead to huge changes in the performance of those campaigns. Media didn't look at their way in that business. So first step is you need to kind of start to look differently and think, yes, I am accountable for driving that company's business. Now, maybe many of you do that, and I don't mean to be disrespectful of those that are, but it's not the tone that I heard some number of years ago, but there is an opportunity to give some guidance in that. And that guidance is starting to break apart charts like this, right? Remember, it was so easy for those of you who are anywhere near my age to go out and buy a few networks or to buy radio stations. And thank God they took the radio, they consolidated them into networks and made it really easy. Or the outdoor industry, same thing. Big consolidation makes it easier. And yet digital is more complicated and more challenging. So those local retailers, those small and medium-sized businesses, the local businesses, how are they going to figure this out? Somebody's got to guide them. Somebody's got to present that opportunity. And somebody's got to explain this mishmash of mobile-only concepts. HTML5, augmented reality, responsive design, showrooming, location targeting, geofencing. I heard it on the stage already today. Somebody's got to explain it to them. And I believe that the local media, in particular the outdoor companies, are best positioned to do that. Now, I'm not suggesting it's going to be easy. I'm not suggesting that you're not going to find resistance, right? And yet there is a huge opportunity to serve the needs of those who are trying to build their business by our being a little bit ahead of that curve and knowing a little bit more than somebody else. And I know it's not easy. I usually give this example a lot of times when I speak. I ask people to pull out a pen. You can do it if you'd like. And if you're right-handed, write with your left hand. If you're left-handed, write with your right hand. Just recognize how hard that is. So anytime we don't think that change is hard, just do that and be sympathetic to the challenge that they face and what can we do to play a role in helping them accomplish that. Because the opportunities that exist within that are tremendous. Again, from Mary's charts, she's suggesting that the escalation in internet in this case and mobile is about a 20 billion future opportunity. And if you remember my early growth charts, it's absolutely going to be there. It is happening. Consumers are doing it. The customers and marketers are interested. Who's going to grab the money? Second point. Second point is that there's so much opportunity to innovate here. There's so many different tools. Now, some of that people resist at. They're sort of nervous about and certain about going after, and I get that. But there's lots of new things that are coming that we don't even sort of see. I don't know how many of you watched the show Shark Tank, but there was an episode recently where a guy had taken his camera and figured out that there's a vibration sensor within a phone, and that they had figured out how to control that vibration, and if you were to set your phone and turn on his app, it would sit automatically and take a 360-degree picture. Now, is that revolutionary? I'm not sure, but it was what caught my attention about that is, wow, what a radical innovation for a very small thing that nobody had thought of before, that never even occurred to me. And it exists within these, and I don't think in some regards that we've even begun to really explore sort of all those opportunities. Now, you've heard some of this here today from people. The path to purchase I heard come up a couple of times this morning. Totally agree. What gets complicated in path to purchase is that somebody's got to explain how that works and what's happening with that and do the research to figure it out. Now, I'm hoping the MMA can take a major leadership role. We're happy to work with others to do that. But if you sense that there's something different that's existing here, I used to always say that in advertising and marketing, I kind of viewed my job from an agency perspective as that I would put out a message and then eventually somebody would take an action, or at least based on a changed attitude, right? But that was the extent of my responsibility. I think what's happening with mobile is that it's going to force us as marketing experts, as media experts, to delve into really what is happening at those moments. I heard even that outdoors sort of seem to take some responsibility for the path to purchase. So I suspect that there's a connection between sort of outdoor and mobile and its ability to really bring that to the forefront. And I mentioned earlier, I kind of tipped my hand a little bit when talking about sensors. But there are a huge number of sensors and more coming within our mobile devices. Even biometric, the ability to understand your mood or your health at that moment, all connected through these devices. Powerful, powerful, that I think we're just beginning to start to figure out, right? I mean, let's remember the iPhone, which was really arguably the world's first smartphone, 1997, it wasn't that long ago. And yet today, we're looking at 50, 60% penetration of devices like that. And here's another example of just from another commercial. Again, advertising, I think, captures the essence of what's happening about some of the unique uses for mobile phones. If we could roll tape, please.
I can watch live TV on my new Sprint phone.
Well, my Sprint phone has TV and downloads music.
I can check email.
I have that. And crime deterrent.
What?
Try and take my wallet.
Give your...
Live TV, wireless music downloads, email, and crime deterrent.
I'm filing a grievance, Ben.
Okay, that had nothing to do with anything. I just thought it was funny, really, nothing else. No other reason. I just like to throw it in there. Listen, so the final point is, so none of these sort of opportunities to, none of this is opportunities to drive more value for our customers, as I mentioned in the first part. The second part about having more tools, more innovation, more dynamics in which we need to help develop for our client members, but also to the big issue in this, and I'm just going to tip the hand, location, location, location. I've had people, I got a sense of this back before mobile existed in some data that I had seen and always paid attention to it. But when I talk to those who have become specialists at doing location-based marketing, too many of them have said to me, I'll tell you what, the CEO of a public company in the mobile space said it this way. He says, Greg, if you ever had anything so good that you didn't want anybody else to know about it, because you're not in some regards prepared to really turn your whole business in that regard, you still got this core business, so you got to migrate to it. He goes, that's location targeting. It's that powerful. We see its impact and its effect for our marketer clients in ways that we couldn't even imagine. So I really suggest and point you that if you're about location, if you think that's important, if you have an already endemic sort of understanding and interest in that, then what do you do to turn in yours? However, the issue is you got to get to scale with this. That's the big thing with this one. And so I think that's where you're going to see an awful lot of consolidation in businesses that you have in yours. I think you're going to see it here to really help solve those problems. I don't have an answer for this one. I don't even have any more information about it. It's just something, again, that you really want to pay an awful lot of attention to. So that's my premise, right? My premise is that you, as local experts with the relationship with marketers who are most trying to satisfy those local marketing problems, have this unique tool, device, consumer interaction, and customer interest in a way that you've never seen. It is, in some regards, being sort of, I think, presented at your doorstep. It's going to be up to you as an industry to decide the degree that you go after that, or choose not, right? Because in the end, it's going to happen. It's going to be huge. My guess is that mobile someday easily exceeds $50 billion industry. That's more than enough for people to create careers and businesses and success within. It's on its way. And what's interesting about it, now having done digital media for 20 years, the one other perspective I add is that I don't think I'm just getting old. I really do think the world's moving faster in some regard. It's not just my perception of it, but I really believe it is. So if you want to find out more, come join us for some more events. With that, thank you very much. Hopefully that was helpful.